I'm Derek Saul in the Breaking News Hub, continuing our coverage of this deadly plane crash in Scottsdale. A plane owned by Motley Crue singer Vince Neil collided with another plane that was parked on a runway on the taxiway at Scottsdale Airport. Here is the plane owned by Vince Neil coming in and crashing with this larger Gulfstream jet. Neil, the singer, was not on this plane. A spokesperson for him told us that there were 2 pilots on board and 2 passengers on board the smaller aircraft. There was 1 person on board the larger aircraft, and we know 1 person has been killed. Let's bring in our CBS News transportation correspondent, Chris Van Cleve now. Chris is based here in Phoenix. Chris, we appreciate your insight. We know this video will be important. Tell us what NTSB investigators will be looking for when they review this footage.
Well, look, the NTSB always welcomes video evidence of an accident. It gives them a much clearer picture than they would otherwise have about what happened here. I mean, the Lear 35 should have a voice data recorder similar to the one that was in the plane that crashed in Philadelphia about a week and a half ago. That's a voice recorder. This gives them a very clear picture of as the plane comes into the runway when the landing becomes atypical. You can see the back of the plane sort of collapse down on one side as it appears part of the main landing gear failed before it veered off the runway and into that Gulf Stream. So that's very helpful visual evidence for the NTSB and FAA as they go back and look at this incident. They're also going to want to know about the maintenance history of this airplane. They will look at what they call human factors, if there were any indications that there was a problem upon landing and how the pilots responded to that problem, if it was something that was controllable at all on their end. And also they'll look at survivability factors. Are there lessons from this accident that may help them make recommendations on how airplanes can be built to better withstand a collision like this, a scenario like this. So the video is a great starting point. It will be a big part of the investigation, but certainly not the only part.
Yeah, and beyond the video, Chris, that we also have some air traffic control audio. To the layperson, it's a little bit hard to tell what the air traffic controller is saying and what they're doing. So I want to play some of it, and let's talk on the back end. Here we go.
Start a climb, go around, I'll call your crosswind turn. 8069, just fly straight out.
Flying straight out, 8069.
Clear track 180, fly eastbound, please. Exit the airspace.
Fly eastbound, exit airspace, clear track 180.
Good trip 751, maintain pattern out, or I'm sorry, just maintain your altitude and enter a right base, expect to go around. We just had an emergency.
Air traffic controller kind of getting other planes out of the way. Do you hear anything in that audio that the layperson might not?
Well, you can clearly hear that controller is under some stress. What they're basically doing there is clearing the airspace around the Scottsdale Airport because they've just had an emergency situation on the runway there. They halted traffic on that runway. So you had other aircraft that were in the vicinity. The Scottsdale Airport's a busy airport for private jets, and JSX also operates there. So you had other planes in the pattern and in the area that were lined up and slotted to land after this one. They needed to make sure that those planes did not come in. So the first thing the controller is going to do is issue a go-around, you heard that, and encourage the aircraft to then clear the airspace while they figure out where they're going to redirect other planes to. We know that JSX had a number of flights that diverted to Sky Harbor, for example. But they want to make sure that there's not another issue while they're dealing with what's right in front of them, which in that moment was an emergency situation where they needed to get fire and rescue rolling and maintain not only safety on the ground, but safety in the airspace around the airport.
Yeah, boy, it's been a busy last couple of weeks for you, Chris. We know you were out there in D.C. covering the crash at Reagan. There was the crash in Philly. Then we had a crash in Alaska, and now we have this. I'm just curious, as somebody who's on this beat, what you've been thinking of the last 2 weeks in terms of aviation safety.
Well, certainly there have been a lot of high-profile accidents, but you don't want to lump things together. What happened here has virtually no impact on the flying public. Most people will never fly on a private jet, so that's just a different scenario than what we saw play out in Washington, D.C. Flying in Alaska is challenging in the wintertime. Obviously, there are questions around what happened there. Weather conditions were challenging at the time of that accident. We'll understand what went wrong as the NTSB looks into it. And, of course, a lot of questions about what went wrong in Philadelphia for the plane to come down like it did. It's easy to look at these things and say, flying is unsafe. That's just honestly not where we stand. The aviation system, Derek, remains very, very safe.
All right, Chris Van Cleve, CBS News transportation correspondent. Thank you so much, Chris. We'll send it back to you guys now in the studio.
All right, Derek.